As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way. Your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord. Good morning. A powerful gospel today, and St. Mark paints for us a very bold picture in just a few words. And we're going to kind of go through the gospel more or less line by line as it is so very rich. So the beginning of the gospel is Jesus is leaving Jericho. And we have to kind of have an idea of what Jericho is. Jericho is the lowest city in the world. It's right down on the Jordan River, not far from the Dead Sea. And Jericho is contrasted from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a city set on a hill. Jerusalem is where the temple is. Jerusalem is where God dwells with his people. And Jericho is like on the opposite end of the spectrum. Jericho, if you will, is a symbol not just of where Jesus was, but where blindness is. God is vision, holiness is vision. Jericho is far from that, down low in the depths and blind. And there is this blind man. He kind of represents Jericho in himself. And what is he doing? He's sitting. He's sitting because he's stuck. Because back in those days, blind people couldn't go anywhere unless somebody led them, because the roads would have been rough and uneven and there would be rocks everywhere. And if you paid attention, you heard in the first reading today, the prophet Jeremiah speaks of the time when the road will be made level and God will call all people back to himself. And so there is this allusion to the healing of the blind and the lame that Jeremiah gives. So here is this blind man sitting stuck in his place. And how does it describe him? As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, the blind man sat by the roadside begging. When do we beg? Probably been a long, long time for some of you since you begged. We beg when there's something we want that we cannot provide for ourselves, that we see no way of earning or acquiring for ourselves, so somebody's going to have to give it to us, right? And so we have to ask, and that asking may be begging. So he sat by the roadside begging. He's a beggar. He needs something. He needs something he's incapable of providing for himself. And he hears this sizable crowd. And that sizable crowd following Jesus. In a sense, almost as if that sizable crowd, at least in my mind, it's almost like the sizable crowd is surrounding Jesus, almost insulating Jesus. And so you see the picture? and he's walking out of Jericho, and there's the blind man sitting on the side of the road begging. And maybe he's heard of Jesus. Maybe he knows the prophecy of Jeremiah that the lame will be healed and the blind will see. And with these thoughts and with these hopes, he cries out to Jesus. And what does he say? Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Or Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me. And so what is the first thing the beggar recognizes that he needs, that he can't provide for himself? God's mercy. And so he begs for God's mercy. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. When was the last time you said, Lord, have mercy? When was the last time you begged for God's mercy? You called out with a humble heart, Lord, have mercy. Let me give you a clue. Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. We begin the Mass echoing the cry of this blind man, begging for something we cannot acquire for ourselves, the mercy and the healing power of God. Now I want to go back to this crowd surrounding Jesus. What is the response of the crowd? The crowd surrounding Jesus hears the blind man begging, sitting, stuck in sin. And Jesus comes by, and there's this big crowd of hanger-ons around Jesus, right? And what is their response? Be quiet, shut up, silence. What is that big crowd? I'm afraid I'm part of that big crowd. I'm afraid of that. I don't want to be. I think about the history of the church over the past 30 or 40 years. I think about the bishops and the priests and the Catholic schools and the pastors and others who get in the way. Not only are they not bringing the blind beggar to Jesus, they're actually getting in the way, running interference, an obstacle to those seeking Jesus. And I pray this day, and I ask you to pray for me, that I would never be. I fear that I have been, and I would pray that I would never be, or our schools would never be, our ministries would never get in the way of the blind man seeking Jesus. But so we have the hanger-oners, and we have the people who are near Jesus, but they're not doing their job as well as they should. And what is the blind man's response to their telling him to be silent, to go away, to not bother us? What is his response? His response is to call out all the more. And so the blind man becomes an image of persistence in prayer, right? Overcoming those obstacles. He calls out all the more. Son of David, have pity on me. Son of David, have pity on, have mercy on me. Lord, have mercy. So now Jesus stops in the story. He stops and he says, call him. And now, happily, the crowd does help. The crowd does go over to the blind man. The crowd does say, take courage. And never have truer words been spoken. The crowd says to the blind man, take courage. Jesus is calling you. And I say to every one of you in this church this morning, Jesus is calling you. Take courage. You know what courage is? You know courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is going forward in the face of fear. It's feeling the difficulty, worrying about the pain or the suffering, but going forward anyway, wondering what the cost may be, but taking the courage to go forward. Take courage. Jesus is calling you. And now again, this story is like a poem in that it's so rich and so many allusions. Apparently, this blind man sitting by the side of the road is covered by a cloak. And what does he do when he hears Jesus calling him? It says he throws off his cloak. And I hope you can imagine now again, you're seeing the picture You can see this blind man kind of casting aside, I imagine it's a dirty and heavy and old cloak that a blind man would have, right? And it's almost weighing him down. But Jesus says, "Come to me." And he throws off the old. And it says he springs up. And now there is a lightness, there is an energy in him. And I hope you all understand the allusion to casting off the old and being given something new. He's going to get a new garment as he's thrown away his old garment. And what's the new garment he's going to get? He's going to get something white and beautiful and new. He's going to get his baptismal garment. And he's going to be clothed by Christ. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. And now the blind man is taken in front of Jesus. He's cast off the old. He's sprung up. He stands before Jesus. And you're all standing before Jesus this morning. And Jesus asks the blind man a question. And he asks you a question. So just imagine for a moment that our Lord is standing in front of you and he asks you this question. What do you want me to do for you? That you cannot do for yourself. It's an important part of that question. What do you want me, Jesus asks, to do for you that you can't do for yourself? And so he is a blind man and he is a beggar and he's sitting on the side of the road and he's stuck in this place and he's overcome these obstacles and he stands in front of Jesus. And now he says his second prayer of this short gospel. His first prayer was, "Lord, have mercy." And his second prayer is, "Master, I want to see." Master, I want to see. The simplicity of this prayer belies its difficulty. Let me tell you, psychologists tell us about coping mechanisms. And what is a coping mechanism? A coping mechanism is one of those things that we use to deal with things in our life that are so difficult we can't face them. And one of the most powerful and one of the most common is denial. I don't want to see. You've all heard of the three monkeys, right? One has his hands like this, right? One has his hands like this, right? And how does the other one have his hands? You know, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I don't want to see. But this man, he does want to see. There's a country music song by a guy named Toby Keith. And it's, "I wish I didn't know now what I didn't know then." And he says, "I'd rather go on loving blind, girl. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I just want to pretend." And you know, it's not just country music songs, and it's not just monkeys. It's the Bible that tells us we oftentimes want to be blind too. The light, I'm quoting the Bible now. "The light came into the world, but people preferred darkness to light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come toward the light, so his works might not be exposed. But whoever lives in the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be clearly seen." So what do we want this morning? Lord, I want to. What do you want? Can you say that honestly? Can you pray that sincerely? Because the reality is, when we see, very often things in our life have to change. When we see clearly, that is going to demand to throw off the old, to be transformed. You know, I want to be right. Anybody here want to be right? Of course I want to be right. I absolutely want to be right. Even when I'm wrong, I want some other people to think I'm right, right? I hope not. I hope not. I hope that I have the courage to say, I want to know it if I'm wrong. I want to see. I want to see that I'm wrong. I want to have the humility to admit it. I want to walk in the light. I don't want to be blind. I want to see. In the book of Proverbs, it says, a fool despises instruction, but whoever heeds reproof is prudent. I want to see, and when I see, I want to see that I was made in the image and likeness of God, that I am a child of God, that God has breathed his life into the dust of the earth and he has created me to share in his being. I want to see. I want to give thanks to God. I want to rejoice. I was blind, but now I see. I want to see. I want to see that I was willed by God and that I want to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. I want to see. I want my neighbors to see. I want my children to see. I want my friends to see. I want to see because life is good and life is a gift and God is loving, and it is a precious thing to be able to stand here in this church this morning and worship him. I want to see. Do you want to see? The simplicity of this prayer belies how difficult it is, because seeing will call us out of our sin and into the light. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where he's going. The light challenges us to hate our blindness, to hate our ignorance. My brothers and sisters, to sum up the whole gospel in this beautiful story, Jesus is standing in front of you. Jesus is calling you, and he's asking you this morning, what do you want me to do for you? Let's all pray. I want to see. I truly want to see the goodness of God, the goodness that he has put in me, my sin and those things that need to change. Lord, I want to see. Lord, have mercy.